Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. And in today's video, we're going to be covering another 2022 NBA mock draft. I think this is one of the favorite things for all of our viewers here on the channel. So if it is, make sure to leave a like on today's video because a lot of work does go into it, not only in creating the graphics, thumbnail, and editing, but also in my actual thought process and research behind these prospects, making sure that I'm bringing the most up-to-date information and my best thoughts and analysis preparing for these videos. And in order to reward me for that, I do hope you consider subscribing today as well. It does just take 1 second. It's completely free to you. You just have to go hit that subscribe button. That's all you have to do. Only about 10% of our viewership is subscribed, which is crazy because we're nearing 9,000 subscribers, which means if everyone who was actually watching the videos hit subscribe, we'd have over 90,000 by now. So it would be absolutely awesome if you guys could hit that subscribe button and help us continue to grow. Let's get moving into the actual mock draft here. And remember, this is based on the standings, the actual end of season. And specifically with this video, it's the end of the play-in. So we know the results now. The New Orleans Pelicans beat the Clippers, got into that 8th seed. The Atlanta Hawks beat the Cleveland Cavaliers, got into the 8th seed. And there was actually a ton of draft pick implications with that we're going to cover in this video. So a lot of shakeup in this mock draft. Remember, the lottery is on May 17th. So there's no lottery yet. Check out the video on the channel explaining how the NBA draft lottery works. Very in-depth. I'll put a card for it here. Also, this is a mock, not a big board. So if I have a player go 10th overall, it doesn't mean I think he's the 10th best player in the class. It's just where I think he could reasonably go. And then also, if you're looking for your specific favorite team, very possible we have an offseason preview for them. I do plan on doing all 30 teams with offseason previews once they are out of the playoffs. But as of right now, we do have a bunch that are on the channel when it comes to some of the teams near the top of the draft, like the Pistons, Magic, Spurs as well. We've got one out for the Oklahoma City Thunder, Houston Rockets. So if you guys are fans of those teams, check out the channel after this video and go watch an offseason preview that goes way more in depth on your favorite team. All right, here we are now. Pick one with the Houston Rockets. Rockets fans, I know how important and excited you are for this pick because it is a big one. You're trying to pair another player around the dynamic duo of Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. And for me, defense is a massive priority here. So there's a few different ways we could consider, but I think this is a big shakeup from where I was with my mock last week. And I think honestly, last week I was just incorrect with where I had a specific player go. And that player was Jabari Smith. Last week I had him fall to 4. I rewatched the tape, reevaluated where he was, and I don't think there's any way he goes out of the top 3. I think Jabari Smith is going to go in the top 3. Now, it is still dependent on the lottery. If some specific instance happens, there's a small chance, but more than likely Jabari Smith is going to be a top 3 pick. And I think he is deserving of a number 1 overall selection, even if he's not my number 1 player in the class. I do have a big board video up on the channel, so go check that out. But Jabari Smith here for me does make a lot of sense for Houston. Versatile defensive player, can protect the rim on the weak side. Also very lengthy and disruptive out on the perimeter, has pretty quick feet, is going to be able to challenge jump shooters. And I think he's got a special offensive talent to him. Houston, you don't need to add another star offensive player, but it doesn't hurt to, right? Jabari Smith, very good offensively, can probably average 20 plus points a game fairly quickly into his career. And a lot of that working off the ball. I've kind of likened him to a plus John Collins, where I think he's a better defender. And I think he's a more skilled offensive player, but John Collins is very skilled in his own right. So for me with Houston here, I think Jabari Smith does make a lot of sense. You could look at some of the other players, but realistically, you probably want to add to the front court. You find a 4 you can plug in next to Alperen Şengün. And then Houston, you're in business. You have pick 17 as well coming up. So I really like the Rockets situation here. I think they're in a very good spot. Moving into pick 2, we've got the Orlando Magic here. And Magic fans, this pick is also extremely important for this franchise. And the player I'm actually mocking here is forward Paolo Banchero out of Duke. And it's actually interesting because I went back and, rewatched my way too early 2022 NBA mock draft where we did have a lot of changes since then. There's a lot of stuff that's different. But Paolo Banchero was in the top 2 then. And it's funny because I have him in the top 2 now. And I think specifically for Orlando here, the reason that this makes sense is because they are, really devoid of a score. They need someone who can score the basketball. And for me, he's one of the best scorers in this class. I consider Jaden Ivey here. I think Jaden Ivey does make some sense to Orlando, even though they have a plethora of guards. But still, Paulo Banchero here, I think more, fluidly fits into that 4 spot and then becomes one of the main scoring options for this Magic team. I considered a lot of options here, but I really landed on Banchero because of his scoring output in the half court. Pick 3, Detroit Pistons here now. And I know Pistons fans are always pumped up for the draft. One of the best communities, honestly, when it comes to fan bases in the NBA, because they are so passionate about their Pistons, even though in recent years, the Pistons have struggled. And a lot of their attention has turned to the NBA draft. So this is a pick that's going to, really right some of the wrongs historically there in Detroit. The team that hasn't had a ton of success since winning the championship back in 2004. But I think this player could help you maybe get back there at some point. That's guard Jaden Ivey. Think about the fire and ice combination here of Jaden Ivey, one of the most explosive players I've ever evaluated, in combination with Cade Cunningham, who is very smooth, can create any shot he wants off the bounce, can create for others. And Jaden Ivey just brings that, dynamic element of, hey, I'm going to get to the rim whenever I want to. Good luck trying to stop me. Oh, and by the way, I'm also a great creator for others as well. So you have this combination now of 2 guys who, maybe you're better with both of them having the ball in their hands. That's not a bad thing. Think about the usage rate in the NBA. The highest used players are around 37%, which means 37% of the time a possession ends with a turnover or their shot or free throws from them, which means if you have 2 of those guys, that's only 74% of your possessions, which means you still have 26% of your possessions ending in other ways, which means Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham can fit together well. And I think having 2 great ball handlers is not a minus in today's league. Look at the success Luka Doncic and Jalen Brunson have had. And now you supersize Jalen Brunson into a Jaden Ivey type. My goodness, good luck stopping Detroit. Jaden Ivey going to be phenomenal here with the Pistons. Pick 4, Oklahoma City Thunder, and you see a new player has fallen to 4. I had him go first overall last week. He falls to 4 here, and I think part of the difficulties with this class, specifically during the mock draft portion, is you do have 4 guys who I think have number 1 type potential. I feel like 4 guys in this class in previous drafts could have been the first overall pick, and to have 4 of them in one class, it's almost like a luxury here, because if you happen to fall to 4th in the lottery or you pick in 4th, you're like, oh my gosh, we're getting a great player. And that great player here is Chet Holmgren. He's going to have the lowest scoring input out of all the top 4 guys, which is partially why I have him fall here. He's not going to have as many assists as Jaden Ivey, probably not going to have as many, big time plays as some of these other guys. But what he's going to do is help a team win. And I think Oklahoma City, out of the top 4 here, is probably the team that's closest to winning, because you have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's an all-NBA type level player. And I know that's a little high praise for him, but I really do think he can get there. Josh Giddey is one of the best rookies from this past class. Lou Dort has really grown as a player himself. I think if you address this front court, and Oklahoma City, they're in a really good spot now with the Clippers missing the playoffs. They have 2 lottery selections, so they have ways here to really improve this team. I don't think it's crazy to say Oklahoma City can make the play-in next year. I know they finished with less than 25 wins. They're a team that tanked. Let's be honest. They were very aggressively tanking. Not only were they trying, they were not trying to win, but they were trying not to win, which is a big difference. So for me with Oklahoma City here, you add Chet Holmgren. He's going to help you in a lot of different facets, specifically with his verticality defensively around the rim. And then you go from there and you build a team that's going to be really competitive and can probably win a lot of games, even in the Western Conference. Pick 5, Indiana here, and a little bit of a shakeup from last week. Last week I went with Benedict Mathurin. This week I'm going with forward AJ Griffin out of Duke, because I do think it's possible we see Buddy Hield rerouted in a deal somewhere else this offseason. And if that's the case, you probably do want to bring in a little bit of shooting and a little bit of length as well around your combination of Duarte and also Halliburton. So for me, AJ Griffin makes a lot of sense because he shot nearly 50% from 3 on catch and shoot opportunities. I feel like I say that every video, but the reason why I say that every video is because I want you guys to know how effective he is on catch and shoot opportunities. Now, will he shoot that clip at the NBA level? No, probably not. But if he's shooting low 40s on catch and shoot opportunities, that's a really, really good shooter. So that's very valuable around Halliburton. He's going to be an awesome player to use outside of the pick and roll because he can be a corner sitter. He can also cut well without the ball in his hands, and he's also got some upside to him. So I think defensively, I think he's a player Rick Carlisle is going to fall in love with, honestly, in the draft. And, for me, it's between Mathurin and Griffin if I'm picking here for Indiana. Pick 6, Portland here now on the clock, and definitely very disappointing end of the season for Portland. Not only their own season, of course, they kind of went tank mode, but specifically with the end of the season for the Pelicans. Pelicans get into the playoffs. Blazers no longer have that second lottery pick. So, and that pick doesn't even stay outside the lottery for them. That pick is actually gone to Charlotte. So now Portland only has one pick in the first round this year, which is a massive, massive shakeup. What I see here from Portland, though, is you're looking at forward Keegan Murray, 6th overall. And the reasoning why is he's a really consistent four-man who can put the ball in the hole, but you don't need to draw up sets for him. He can play off of Damian Lillard. He's going to be a good screen and roll guy. You can post him up with mismatches. He's going to hit the offensive glass, and he's going to be able to defend his position, which is very valuable. For me, Portland, the biggest thing that they need to improve on is defensively. They need to become a lot more consistent. So I think they're going to be a team that's interesting to watch for the actual draft lottery, because if they move up into the top 4, we could be looking at scary hours because they have cap space, Damian Lillard. They're going to be able to bring back Yusuf Nurkic, and then potentially a top 4 pick. That's a pretty good combination of players. Also, Anthony Simons is there, and it looks like they found something with Brandon Williams as well. So for me with Portland, I think they're a team with a lot of upward mobility if they execute this offseason, which that's always the hardest part to do, right? It's always harder to execute than to set yourself up to execute. So we'll see if they can get it done. But nonetheless here, I think Keegan Murray is a really good pickup for them at 6. Moving into 7, Sacramento here. And this is maybe not the most traditional route here for Sac, but I think that it does make a lot of sense just given that I think he's the best player available at this point, and that's forward/guard Benedict Mathurin. I think he can play the 3 in the NBA. He's probably a hybrid 3 and 2 wing, which is fine, because if you're looking at Sacramento, you got Davion Mitchell, you've got De'Aaron Fox. Realistically, you still need to flesh out this wing spot, whether that's at the 2 or 3, because I think Mitchell, Fox, they're not going to be on the floor together all the time, so you have some flexibility of playing Mathurin at the 2 at certain points of the game, but he can also play a lot at the 3, and he's going to be able to match up well there. He's very athletic, so I think he's going to be able to guard a lot of wing players. He's got good burst to him, good athleticism. And I think if you're looking for Sacramento, you want to add another volume scorer, someone who can shoot the ball well, and work off the ball as well. And I think Mathurin, even though he didn't show that a ton at Arizona this past year, didn't really do a lot of cutting. His physical profile and his athletic traits, I think, do set him up well to be a great cutter in the NBA. It's just about the mindset of, hey, I'm going to cut without the basketball. And if you're going to play with the Kings around Domantas Sabonis, you're going to have to learn to do it if you want to find success. So for me, Mathurin, I think a really good fit here into Sacramento, even though it's not the most traditional pick in my mock drafts. Pick 8, we've got the New Orleans Pelicans here last week. They went with Ochai Agbaji, but, I just felt like maybe that's not the right pick for them, especially with Trey Murphy and Herb Jones, 2 players that, last year I really did like. I had both first-round grades on them, and I think I've been vindicated in that with how they both played this year. Herb Jones, awesome defensively. Trey Murphy, a good 3-and-D wing as well in his own right. So I think both of those guys make this pick a little bit more difficult to decide, but I did go with guard Shaedon Sharpe this week, who I did not include in the mock last week. And the reason why I didn't include him, for anyone who doesn't know, it's very possible he stays at Kentucky, but I do think it's possible he also explores his draft eligibility and potentially does declare. If he declares, I think he's a lock to go in the top 10. I think he can maybe go as high as 5. To be honest with you guys, I need to see more from him, and I think the draft combine would be huge for that. When you're evaluating a player like Shaedon Sharpe and you're trying to size him up compared to some of these college players, I've got 2 to 4 years of tape on some of these guys. Whereas for Shaedon Sharpe, I'm looking at some high school film, which is a little more spotty if we're going to be honest about it. Now, I am a high school basketball coach myself, so I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of how to really evaluate a high school player. But it is just more difficult naturally, which is part of why the NBA got rid of the eligibility to come into the NBA draft without being out of high school for a year. But of course, there's a little bit of an exception here for Shaedon Sharpe with the way that his process worked. I think for New Orleans here, you do take a big swing on upside. A team that's now in the playoffs also gets to take a swing on a player that could be really, really great. And potentially, if he stays at Kentucky, could be a top 3 pick in the following draft. And you're getting him here at pick 8. I think there is some really good long-term upside here for New Orleans. Pick 9, San Antonio here now. Of course, season didn't end the way you wanted to in the play-in, but they are very feisty and competitive. Spurs fans, I really recommend checking out my offseason preview. On your Spurs team, you have 3 first-round picks, though, in this mock draft. So let's go ahead and jump into pick 1 for them, and that's Jalen Duren, center from Memphis. And the thing for me with, San Antonio, after the Drew Eubanks trade, where they included him to Toronto and then he got waived, I thought that he was actually a pretty solid backup for them. And the fact that they moved on from him kind of pointed me toward the idea that maybe they have future plans to addressing the center position. You know, Jakob Poeltl was also on the trade block. So I think Jalen Duren here could make some sense if you want to move Poeltl, but also I think probably best case scenario here, just given the fact that you already have 3 first-round picks, you could move up the other picks together and try and get back up near the lottery. But realistically, you could keep Poeltl, have Duren come off the bench, because I do think he's probably a year away from becoming a really heavy starter in the NBA. And if you want to talk about a comparison for this player, maybe a long-term ceiling, you'd have to look at Bam Adebayo. This guy is nearly a clone to Bam Adebayo. He moves his feet very well in the perimeter, similar size and stature. And I think he's someone who has a lot of similar skill sets as well to Bam. So if you're looking for a long-term development, you know, someone to study and for him to mold his game after, I think Bam Adebayo is the perfect player for him to watch. Pick 10, Washington Wizards here now on the board. And of course, the biggest concern here, if you're a Washington fan, is will Bradley Beal stay? Should we want him to stay? Because he is in line to get a Supermax extension, and that is a lot of money to be paying toward a guy for a team that, you know, hasn't really gone anywhere with him. Now, I'm not saying that you should for sure not pay him, but I'm also not saying that it's a no-brainer to give him the bag either. So I think there's a lot to figure out in Washington, but with this selection, I'm going with guard Johnny Davis, just best player available at this spot. And I think that's what Washington really needs to pursue. And it happens to work out here because I do think they need guard. I think they could consider Jalen Duren had he been here, but I think Johnny Davis does make a lot of sense as well. It gives you a combo guard. If Bradley Beal does not want to stay, Johnny Davis could maybe become a build-around piece for you, specifically with his half-court scoring capabilities. If he develops and comes along a little bit more as a three-point shooter, he could be really, really dangerous. Now, I think that is a big if. I think he's a player with a very high ceiling, but also a relatively lower floor than some of these other guys in the lottery. Some of these players, I do think when you watch them enough, you get a pretty good estimation for where they're actually going to be. You know, ceiling and floor, sometimes those feel like, you know, bigger, like, oh, what ifs. But I do think Johnny Davis is more in that what if category because, you know, with his shot selection specifically in the way that he plays basketball, he is a little bit more viable to streaky shooting. I think he's a little bit more viable to having off nights. So I think it's going to be an interesting way to see how his career plays out because, you know, with the type of shots he shoots, he is more eligible to kind of hit that floor level. Pick 11, New York Knicks here now. Knicks obviously not having the season that they wanted to have, but now with this spot, there are some positives to look at. Obi Toppin ended the season greatly. Emmanuel Quickley ended the season phenomenally. Those two, in the absence of Julius Randle, were great this season. So that is what you have to hang your hat on. And RJ Barrett was a great player this year as well. I think that kind of flew under the radar, surprisingly, because you feel like the Knicks are almost always in the media. But really, I don't think we heard enough about RJ Barrett's season, how great he was playing, even though the Knicks were not winning. They've got big questions with Mitchell Robinson. We'll see how they go about addressing that. But I have guard Dyson Daniels here, and part of this is part of Tom Thibodeau's defensive system. You know, it's very reliant on bigs, but I think if you can get a really solid perimeter defender here in Dyson Daniels, it does make a lot of sense. He competed in the NBA Rising Stars game this year, and I think he's a player who is very intriguing simply because of his size as a point guard and his defensive capabilities. Now, there's real potential here that this is Frank Ntilikina 2.0, and Knicks fans might be rolling their eyes at this. But at the same time, you know, you can't just say, oh, it didn't work when we took a 6'5" guard before who was defensive minded, so we can't ever do that again. You know, that's really not good thinking, and it leads to a lot of players becoming, you know, missed picks. Like, look at Luka Doncic. There's examples here in the NBA where, oh, we took a foreign player and it didn't work out, so we don't want to take another foreign player. You know, it's not the same player. Dyson Daniels isn't Frank Ntilikina. Now, it's possible his career could play out that way. I'm not the biggest Dyson Daniels fan myself, but I see the appeal here to New York just based off of his frame, his playmaking capabilities, and his defensive prowess. Pick 12, Oklahoma City here. Thunder fans, leave a like if you're excited for the fact that the Clippers did miss the postseason this year. Obviously, tough end of the season for the Clippers. I feel like they were a playoff team had they been healthy this year, obviously. But nonetheless, the pick here is in the lottery for Oklahoma City. And to complement the Chet Holmgren pick, we're going with another big. We're going to go all in on rim protection here for Oklahoma City. Center Walker Kessler led the nation in blocks per game, was the National Defensive Player of the Year from the Auburn Tigers. And think about this front court. You go from having Derek Favors as your best front court player to all of a sudden having Chet Holmgren and Walker Kessler. That is massive improvement. And I think those two could be really fun to watch. Holmgren obviously shoots the three ball very well at a 39% clip this past year from Gonzaga. And then likewise, Walker Kessler didn't shoot the ball well this year, but started shooting threes. So you could have two inside out bigs that can work off of each other. And with Chet Holmgren, you don't have to have any worry about playing him at the 4. He's skilled enough offensively to play it, versatile enough defensively to play that position, especially if you have a Walker Kessler behind him. Teams are going to be afraid to shoot the basketball against Oklahoma City. You pair that with a 6'6" point guard in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You also have a 6'8" point guard in Josh Giddey. And then your shortest player on the floor, Lou Dort, is probably your best defensive player. Oklahoma City finds an identity through this draft. They get really good defensively, a lot of length, size, and rim protection. And I think Oklahoma City becomes scary good moving forward. Pick 13, Charlotte Hornets, another team that should be considered winners, even though there was a very saddening end to the season for them, simply because the play-in did not go as they wanted. But the fact that the Pelicans get in means you do have 2 top 15 picks, Charlotte. So Hornets fans, leave a like on the video. There is still a lot to be excited about, and you still do have LaMelo Ball moving forward, as well as Miles Bridges, who had another really good season this year. Center Mark Williams is what I landed on here now for Charlotte. In past mocks, I've been looking at Walker Kessler, but obviously the Clippers losing, moving the Thunder pick above Charlotte, more than likely means that one of Kessler or Williams is off the board. And in this rendition of my mock draft, I opted for Kessler over Williams. But I think these two guys are very comparable, and I think Charlotte fans are probably very happy to see Williams. Williams is a little bit more switchable, in my opinion, than Walker Kessler. Walker Kessler is probably going to project as a true drop big, whereas Williams probably plays as a drop big, but is a little bit more switchable. And I think he's also going to be a little bit better if you want to play a blitz style defense on occasion. But I think ultimately here for Charlotte, the biggest thing is you just need to find rim protection. And Mark Williams is going to bring you that, maybe not at the rate that Walker Kessler does, but he is still really good in his own right. So I do want to give Mark Williams a lot of love here in this video, because I think he's a player that is a really good grab here for Charlotte at 13. Moving into 14, now we got the Cleveland Cavaliers here. Disappointing end of the season for them as well, but there's always a bright side. Bright side here is since they missed the lottery, the Pacers no longer get this selection, and instead Cleveland will be selecting with the 14th pick, assuming they don't win the lottery, which there is a small chance that they do. But again, very, very small, minute chance. My guess is they'll be picking 14th in the draft. And then 14th overall, I have them going with forward Ochai Agbaji, which is actually a phenomenal grab here for Cleveland. Because this is a team that's really void of wing talent and wing depth, and you get arguably one of the more NBA ready wings in this class in Ochai Agbaji. He's just a player who's going to come in, do his job, and play the game the right way, specifically off the ball on both ends of the floor. His positioning, it seemingly is always in the right position. That's a credit to Bill Self, who's a great college coach. And it's also a testament to Ochai Agbaji really improving as a player in his 4 years at Kansas. And then offensively as well, he works well without the ball, shoots the ball well off the move on the catch, and is also a pretty good standstill shooter in his own right. So for me here with the Kansas forward Ochai Agbaji going to Cleveland, I just think the pairing makes too much sense. Cleveland badly needs a forward, and Ochai Agbaji probably lands near the end of the lottery. So I think these two probably are destined for not a reunion, but an appearance together at some point. 15, Charlotte back on the board, of course, went with Mark Williams at 13. And 15 here, we're taking a big swing. We're taking a long-term approach here for Charlotte, because if you look at their lineup, they don't really need to add anything. I mean, they've got a lot of good contributors already. So for me, I'm going to go for the fences with my second pick in the top 15, and that's guard Jaden Hardy. First time I have him going out of the lottery in quite some time, and I still think he's a top 15 player in this class. I think he belongs in the top 15, and he's a player who, if he figures things out, which it might take a little bit of time, but if he does, watch out, because he's got some star potential to him. Again, another player like Johnny Davis, who has a very low floor, but a very high ceiling. And I think his is even more variable than Johnny Davis. I think Johnny Davis is probably a little bit safer, a little bit more consistent. Jaden Hardy's not, but at the same time, you have to consider he was playing pro players, not collegiate players. And as well, in the NBA G League Ignite startup, it's hard to find rhythm. You're just meeting your new teammates now. You don't have as much practice time. Schedule's a little bit more condensed than college. It's tougher to find success in the G League as an 18 or 19-year-old than it is in college, in my opinion. So for me, Jaden Hardy here, I think is big upside. Obviously, they have Book Knight as well, and they still have Kai Jones as well. So they've got a lot of young players coming up. Charlotte could also look to use these picks in a trade to, kind of find a star if they wanted to, include Gordon Hayward's salary. You could include Kai Jones, James Bouknight, and these 2 first-round picks, and you could probably get almost anything you want in the league, within reason, of course. So I think Charlotte, definitely an interesting spot, but if I'm keeping the pick here, already having addressed center, I'm going to take the stab on Jaden Hardy. Pick 16, Atlanta Hawks here now. Obviously, Hawks fans super happy to be in the postseason. And what I have them going with here is a guard in Ty Washington. Same as last week, but outside of the lottery at this point. And the reasoning I still think is clear here. I still think you need a backup point guard. I know some people would think, oh, we have Sharif Cooper. He went in the second round. So not that I think Sharif Cooper is bad, but teams aren't going to say, oh, last year we took a second round point guard, so we're not going to consider one here in the first. That's not really how the NBA works. I think that they're going to look for what one of their biggest weaknesses is. And you could either argue defense or backup point guard. And for me, I opted to go with the backup point guard route in this one. I've also opted to go defense in the other ones. And there's definitely difference in opinion on what you want to do here. Atlanta fans, let me know, would you have preferred to go with a defensive-minded player rather than Ty Washington? 17, Houston, a team still needing more defense even after the Jabari Smith selection, and we're going to get it here in a big way in the form of forward Jeremy Sohan. Goes a little bit lower in this mock draft. And the thing here with Houston, if you add in Jabari Smith, you draft Jeremy Sohan, and then hopefully Usman Garuba can be healthy this year and kind of make more of an appearance this season for Houston going forward, you have a pretty good trio of defensive wings, and then Jayshawn Tate himself plays fairly well defensively. So you've got almost a quartet there of guys who are defensive minded. Jabari Smith, obviously very talented on the offensive end as well. Sohan, not quite as much. He's kind of limited offensively, but he can be a tempo pusher. He can grab the rebound and push. And I think it does open your life up to some potential small ball lineups where you're maybe playing, KPJ, Jalen Green, and then 3, 4, 5, you probably run something out there of Garuba, Jabari Smith, and Sohan. I mean, that is a realistic lineup. Sohan has a lot of experience guarding fives at the collegiate level, and I think he's going to do a good job of it as well at the NBA level. So Houston probably gets really switchable and has a lot of fun lineups that they can employ next season if they do draft Sohan and Jabari Smith like they did in this mock draft. Pick 18, Chicago Bulls here now. Obviously, they're in a tough spot here. 6 seed going up against the 3 seed Milwaukee Bucks. We'll see what they can do in the playoffs. But as for them moving forward, I think it's all about wing depth. And you find a really good defensive wing, specifically for when, Caruso and Lonzo Ball both suffered injuries this year. And we kind of saw the defense shy away a little bit. The defense kind of faded, and so did their record as a result. I think you need to get better defensively. E.J. Liddell from the Buckeyes, very good defensive forward, averaged nearly 3 blocks a game this past year for Ohio State, and the film matches it. Really good anticipation as a rim protector, very smart and heady when it comes to rotations. And I think he's a very competitive player on that end of the floor with a pretty decent requisite offensive skill set. The idea that you have Patrick Williams back for the entire season next year, along with E.J. Liddell then coming off the bench, kind of shores up a lot of the questions at forward for me. And I think Chicago probably a lot more well-rounded going into next season. Pick 19, Minnesota Timberwolves here. What a phenomenal season for this team. I do want to give Patrick Beverley a shout out with the Bev Light. That's very, very awesome to see. And the Wolves really, they earned something like this. This was a tough, gritty season from them. Patrick Beverley came in and changed the culture, and I love it for them. They're in a really great spot now, and I think you're going to take a stab here on talent and a guard/forward in Malachi Branham, who can defend his own position fairly well, and also I think has some long-term upside. Now, he's not the quickest guy, but he shoots the 3-ball well, plays within himself. He's going to be able to knock down a mid-range jumper, and he's going to be able to finish up the rim. He's got a pretty good NBA frame. So if you're looking for Minnesota, I think they're in a similar boat to Chicago where they do need to add a little bit of depth. I think this year they were kind of a little heavily reliant on guys like Jalen Noel and at times, Okogie or Jake Layman, who those two started to see, less minutes by the end of the year, but you could notice that the forward depletion was real for them. Taurean Prince saw a ton of minutes. He's headed toward unrestricted free agency this offseason. He's going to be looking for, a nice contract somewhere. We'll see if he can get it. But I think Malachi Branham does make some sense here long-term for Minnesota. Pick 20, San Antonio back on the board. Obviously, earlier we went with Jalen Duren. from Memphis. And we're not switching it up. This is 3 mock drafts in a row here that we're going forward Tari Eason. And in past videos, I have been critical about his offensive skill set. I think he is a very raw offensive player, but I don't want to be misinterpreted here. I do think he is a good defensive player, specifically with his versatility and his athleticism. I think he's going to be a tough player to score on because I think he's just physically naturally gifted on the defensive end of the floor. So for San Antonio, a team that's looking to probably get, a little tougher, a little bit more athletic, a little bit nastier, to add not only Duren, but also Tari Eason in one draft does feel like a good way to kind of solve some of those problems. You kind of outfit a talented roster with a little bit more strength and physicality and athleticism, and it's usually a good blend. And I think that's what San Antonio's been missing, but they've got it here now with Eason and Duren in round 1 with one more pick to come. 21, Denver Nuggets here now. And in this mock, switching it up for Denver, I'm going with guard Kennedy Chandler. Now, Nuggets fans might be saying, whoa, we have Monty Morris. We don't need to take a guard. Like, I understand the rationale there, but realistically, Denver, you should probably be looking for one of the best players available. I know they went with Bones Highland last year. I see him more as a combo guard, and I think Kennedy Chandler does help you defensively, specifically on the perimeter, something I think Denver is lacking a little bit. And part of the reasoning for this pick as well, Jamal Murray's coming off a very serious injury. And the reality of the situation, especially in the NBA, when someone has a catastrophic knee injury like that, probably isn't going to play 82 games ever again in a season. So in a lot of games where he's not available, instead of having to roll out Facu Campazzo moving forward, you do have a guard that can play behind Monte Morris. You could probably play him alongside Monte Morris because Kennedy Chandler is a very aggressive guard who can also play really good defensively. He can pick up 94 feet, has quick feet, and I do think that he's going to be a nice player in the NBA. So I am switching it up. Maybe not the most traditional or conventional pick here for Denver, but one I do actually think that their GM Tim Connolly should consider. 22, Memphis Grizzlies now at this spot, and this is a pick that I really, really enjoy. And it's actually guard Ousmane Dieng, who kind of blends as a forward as well. And this is your perfect Kyle Anderson replacement, a player who maybe is not the most athletic, but he's a really good playmaker. He can get downhill consistently, even though he's not the fastest guy. He just knows how to use his body, knows how to beat defenders downhill, and is a really good playmaker out of those situations. He's a drive and kick specialist. I think honestly, I've said it before on Twitter and everything, which is a good time to tell you guys, go check out our Twitter, link in the description. He's kind of everything that Killian Hayes wishes he was. I think that Ousmane Dieng has massive upside here in Memphis. A team that potentially could have had a lottery pick. Then maybe they still will if 3 teams move up over the Pelicans, over the Lakers selection. Now, I don't think that's likely. It's like a 1% chance only, but it's possible that the Grizzlies still end up with a lottery pick. But ultimately here, Ousmane Dieng specifically going to Memphis solves your long-term issue about losing Kyle Anderson, and probably is fine coming off the bench for the duration of his career. Pick 23, Brooklyn Nets here now on the board. Obviously, very interesting team because, we haven't really seen Ben Simmons yet. Maybe by the time of this video, maybe he's played in the playoffs. We never really know with Ben Simmons. It's always up in the air. But what I think the Nets are going to look for here is a talented forward in Nikola Jovic, who I think, I had him go a little bit lower than I've had him go in past mock drafts. And this is one of those things, when Shaedon Sharpe is in the class, it does kind of reshape what the positioning looks like, specifically for, kind of those wings, 6'7", 6'6" wings. Jovic is a little bit taller at about 6'10", and he is very skill oriented. So I think he's a player who maybe could go as high as 14 even. I have thought about him at a lot of these spots. He does make some sense, but I'm not sure what his exposure is going to look like in comparison to players who, GMs and scouts have been watching a little bit more consistently in the USA during, college basketball. So Nikola Jovic, I really do like him here. I think Brooklyn gets a great player. And then likewise here, 24 Milwaukee Bucks. They go out and draft Kendall Brown here, forward from Baylor, who just didn't have the tournament that I think he was hoping to have. Now, I think he is still a very good player. And someone with his athletic profile. And I think he's a really good offensive connector in terms of his ability to attack closeouts, keep the ball moving. He's going to play to a role, and he's going to excel at that role. Not only is he going to do it, but he's going to be good at it. And the thing here for Milwaukee, I think this is a phenomenal pickup. You add more length and size, gives you another consistent forward to play behind Pat Connaughton early. And I think at some point, Kendall Brown could be a starting forward in the league. Now we'll see if he ever gets there with Milwaukee specifically, but I do think him staying in green ends up being a good result, not only for the Bucks, but also for Brown. 25, San Antonio here now on the board. Spurs, their third first-round pick. Remember, they went with Duran and Tari Eason with the other two. And here at 25, I'm actually opting for guard Blake Wesley out of Notre Dame. And this maybe will bring some questions for Spurs fans. Wait, why would we take Blake Wesley? Well, let's talk about it. Lonnie Walker is headed toward restricted free agency. So this does give you a potential out and saying, oh, maybe we don't want to pay him, $12 million a year or whatever. We could maybe afford to save some money. We've already addressed a big man spot. We've already addressed forward. We could have doubled down on forward here too. I did consider that for San Antonio, but ultimately Blake Wesley, I do think is a good high upside guard that, maybe could lead a second unit at some point rather quickly into his career. So good shot creation skills. Kind of reminds me of Cam Thomas, who came out of LSU last year and kind of has lit up the league a little bit for Brooklyn. Obviously not going to play a huge role in the playoffs because he is a rookie who's a little questionable defensively. But for me, Blake Wesley kind of follows a similar pathway and trajectory. Not quite as successful as Cam Thomas at the collegiate level, but I do think could have a nice NBA career. 26, Dallas Mavericks here now. The Mavs, definitely an interesting team. Luka Doncic out for game 1 of the NBA playoffs against the Utah Jazz. So we'll see how that playoff series shakes out. But I think the biggest thing and the biggest takeaway for Mavs fans this season has to be Jason Kidd's ability to install a successful team defense with Luka Doncic on the floor. Those two things are somewhat difficult to do because Luka Doncic is not the most consistent when it comes to boxing out and playing good defensively. Now, I think he's actually an underrated defender. I think he's better when he's engaged than people give him credit for. He actually does cut off a lot of drives. But I think there are still some weak points specifically because of his focus on that end of the floor. So you go out and find a really good defensive forward here in Ron Harper Jr. And it kind of, complements and perfects that new trio you have of Reggie Bullock, Dorian Finney-Smith, and then Ron Harper Jr. being the third guy here. His dad played in the NBA. And I think you can't really say enough for players who've been around the NBA. He's going to come in and he's going to be accustomed to what's going on day one. And I do think that is a benefit that he will have over other players. And I know a lot of people are looking at him as a second round guy. I just don't see it. I think he needs to be a first round selection, specifically with his talent. I mean, he's a very good defensive player, really built off of fundamentals and footwork, which you don't really see a lot. Usually a lot of the best defensive players in today's league are athletic. But I think Ron Harper Jr. very well set up for success on both ends of the floor because he has an interesting frame. I think he's skilled enough to play the 2 or 3, but physical enough to play the 4 defensively as well. So a lot of flexibility here you'll get with Ron Harper Jr. And I think Dallas is in a really good spot with this selection. 27, we've got Golden State here now, and the Warriors are in an interesting situation. Kevon Looney himself is headed toward unrestricted free agency. So is it the last time we see Kevon Looney in the Bay Area? I'm not sure. It seems like he's always going to stick around, doesn't it? But just in case he doesn't, I'm going to protect them here. Go with center Trace Jackson Davis, who, he's played more power forward in his career at Indiana. But I think, at 6'9" or 6'10", I think that the Hoosiers big probably fits best as a center in the NBA. And you're asking, why does he fit with Golden State so well? Well, he brings some of the things that they need. He's a rim protector, very athletic. I think he's the perfect complement around Draymond Green because it gives you an athletic weak side rim protector who can really, send shots flying and also can sit dunker spot and really slam them home if Draymond Green puts it up there for him. But the other thing that really fits so well into Golden State offense, he's a very good screener. And anyone who watches Golden State basketball knows how important screens are to their offense, not only in freeing up Steph Curry, but in also assisting in, Klay Thompson getting open and also finding shots for Jordan Poole now. So I think for me, Trace Jackson Davis, I think is an obvious fit into Golden State. And even though he's maybe a little high here, maybe not a true first round level player in terms of his actual skill set and talent, I think the fit here trumps all of that. And I think he becomes a really good grab for Golden State. 28, Miami Heat here now at this spot. The Heat have had a great season, obviously number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. And I have them actually getting quite a bit better here with the forward Trevor Keel's selection out of Duke. On a player who I just think really fits Heat culture because he is very physical, And he's actually a really aggressive player, especially as of late. That's really where I saw a change from him toward the end of the season for Duke. Started getting to the rim with more consistency, started finishing around the rim, and I think he's also got enough skill set to kick the ball out to the perimeter to find shooters. He's not going to be the best playmaker by any means, but I don't think he's a terrible minus in that regard either. And defensively, he's going to be a tough out. Maybe not the most skilled defender as of right now. He's going to require a little bit of coaching up. That's why he's going 28th overall. But if you're able to grab him here, I trust Eric Spoelstra and that Heat staff to get the job done with him and actually turn him into a really good player. You take the Markieff Morris minutes right now, you turn him into Trevor Keels, and I think long-term you do have a good outcome. 29, Memphis on the board again. Remember, they went with guard Ousmane Dieng from the NBL of the New Zealand Breakers. And we're actually going to stick with that theme here, going with another guard from New Zealand for the New Zealand Breakers. That's Hugo Bassan. He's a French guard. And a lot of people who've been keeping up with the channel are going to say, whoa, big switch up here. You had Hugo Bassan go way lower. And again, this is partially, talking about the potential range here of the NBA draft. Hugo Bassan, I have him as a top 15 player in this class. I think realistically he should get looked at around the top 15, but there is a little bit of drama here when it comes to, where is he going to go? Because some of these teams just outright probably aren't going to be looking for a scoring combo guard. Specifically, you look at Houston, Oklahoma City, who have multiple picks. You're also looking at some of these other teams in here. Cleveland, maybe not quite looking for a guy like Hugo Bassan with the idea that Colin Sexton could be coming back. And they also drafted Karis LeVert, or traded for Karis LeVert, excuse me. So, those teams are going to all be looking for specific niches and things to add. So I do think it's possible Hugo Bassan slides a little bit. This is a massive steal to me. His offensive capabilities, I think, would fit phenomenally into Memphis. Gives them another shooter who you could use off the move a little bit more than they currently use any of their other guys, and adds just a little wrinkle to their offense. Now, defensively, he needs to improve. There's going to require a lot of coaching here to coach Hugo Bassan up on the defensive end of the floor. But overall, I do think he's an intriguing prospect and one that I would take much higher than 29. 30 here now, Oklahoma City Thunder, the capstone of the first round. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed. If you did, make sure to leave a like. And here with the Thunder, after going with two bigs earlier on, I'm looking for another big. And this is going to make things very fun in Oklahoma City, because not only did we add 1 and 2 shooting bigs, we're adding a third with Isaiah Mobley, who shoots the 3 ball really well. He's a junior coming out of USC. Of course, most of you will know him as the brother to Evan Mobley, but he's a good player in his own right because of his capability to shoot the 3 ball. He's a career 38% three-point shooter from USC with a lot of volume, has a little bit of playmaking feel to him. And I think the biggest concern for me with Oklahoma City is their front court play. I just don't know if there's enough front court production from this team from where they've been at the last couple of years. You go out, you fix that immensely in this draft. You draft Chet Holmgren, you draft Walker Kessler, you draft Isaiah Mobley, and now you have a ton of giraffe-like players with extreme length and pretty good defensive feel as well. I think Isaiah Mobley's got to get better on the perimeter defensively. He does have some areas to improve, but again, that's why he's going pick 30, right? This is not a lottery pick. There's always going to be stuff to nitpick on for guys who are going 30th overall. But I think Isaiah Mobley, his shooting capabilities, you could play him next to Chet Holmgren and have a lot of length. And in fact, with how skilled Holmgren and Mobley are, you could maybe even see lineups where we have Giddey, Gilgeous-Alexander, Mobley, Holmgren, and also Walker Kessler on the floor, which, I mean, that'll at least be a lot of fun to watch. You also have Pokashevsky you can throw in there, who they've played at point guard as a 7-footer. The Oklahoma City Thunder, they could find a fun identity. Definitely adds a lot of entertainment value, which if I'm Sam Presti, I am considering that because I do want fans to come to our games. And I think that Oklahoma City, they're going to be in an interesting spot dependent on how the lottery treats them. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed. Thank you again so much for watching. I do put a lot of work into these. It takes a lot of time considering which players could go where. So if you do enjoy and you do appreciate the time I put in, please hit that subscribe button. Let's get up to 9,000 subs if we can. That'd be absolutely awesome. Leave a like again on today's video, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.